Welcome to the Didi and Lital Show. Advice, thoughts, and stories from a married couple on cybersecurity, technology, and life in general. Now here are your hosts, Didi and Lital.
Hello and welcome to the Didi and Lital Show. It's another week. What's up, Didi?
All is well. Shorzy's back. Canada. So I am looking forward to binging on that one. In the meantime, I'm binging on old anime from Crunchyroll. Because there's no hockey to watch, because I can tell you what the score is going to be. They're going to lose. Sometimes in overtime and sometimes not.
And there is no football and there is...
Spring training has started, but who the fuck cares about baseball?
Mm-hmm. Good.
So, yes.
So we can go to business.
We can talk shop. Yes, we can go directly to shop.
So you had an identity topic to bring up today.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
So, as I was working with some of my team members, we built some very, very cool features. One of the coolest features is what we call user trust. It tells you, is Lital as a whole, is her behavior as a whole put her at higher risk, lower risk, medium risk of doing something bad? It has to deal with her rank in the company. It has to deal with her rank in of what the action that she does, the system that she has access to. It's a very, very complicated model of a lot of parameters, and it tracks your behavior, and it tracks this access that you have and how much you deviate from your normal behavior. And it's a very interesting thing because I believe it's very novel to us. But it also brings in something that the old systems. So when you kind of come in a user access system, there's something called application reputation. So you come in when you want to govern access, you say, you know what? I don't like my employees watching porn in the middle of the day, so block all porn applications. Mm-hmm. So that's called application classification. You want to say, please immediately block stuff from IPs that have bad reputation. There's something called IP reputation. So you know that this IP is related to phishing, this IP is related...
So basically all the threat intel you're getting, you kind of like blocking.
So these things exist, but there was no equivalent thing to say... There is something to say this user's password has been compromised and seen in the dark web, but correlation to that actual effect, I saw it as meaningless. But a lot of our customers want to say, let me take a look at who are my users that are most likely to cause problems. And that's something I want to build policy on top of.
Okay.
And when we started talking about this with customers understood this right away. But some of our peers did not. And this was very funny because they came to me and showed me, but Okta does something and Microsoft does something. And I said, yes, they do something called risk-based authentication or session trust management. So one of the things I've decided that we should talk about is the difference between user reputation and session trust and risk-based authentication. I like to talk about risk-based authentication because my team and I were pioneers for this in the RSA days. The product that we built was called RSA RBA, and we have like a bazillion patents on it. So every time somebody comes up and says, hey, I logged in today from Boston and 3 minutes later I logged in from China, this is bad. I said, yeah, but that's RBA. So explaining what risk-based authentication is, what session trust is, which relates to our previous conversation about shared signals, and what is user trust and user scores, and basically user reputation and application reputation, I think is a critical conversation to have in the identity space because it's also related to non-human identities, which is a very big topic today.
Yep.
And understanding how do you deal with this ecosystem and what can you do in terms of a policy and remediation. So let's start with the basics. Risk-based authentication. If you're using an IDP today that doesn't support risk-based authentication, you should dump that platform. It's known thing. It's usually with a set of known parameters like impossible travel, like
Does it come pre-configured in most of them, or you need to define what's risky for you?
You usually need to define a couple of things. A, if that you want to use it, because in a bank, so we originally invented this for banking. The idea was to use RBA was in 2005, the banks came in and said everybody has to have multi-factor authentication for logging into banks. At that point in time, SMSs were expensive and they were still secured, not like today, but they were expensive. There was a cost associated with this, but also there was friction associated with this. And also it was not clear who's going to carry the cost. If you remember in the olden days,
The customer had to accept that he's paying for the SMS coming in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I think it might be still happening.
Yeah, who cares?
Nobody cares
Nobody
about
cares.
it anymore.
Nobody has checked their phone bill in a bazillion years. Data is
Cheap.
data is the way.
Yeah.
So most of us are charged on data, not on the additional services like that.
Yep.
Which, by the way, if you ever seen the movie BlackBerry, they're talking about that in the movie of why BlackBerry failed. Watch the BlackBerry movie. And also understand why you can never trust Canadian companies, because they want to move the penguins to Ontario. Luckily, they failed. Going back to work, I'm still stuck on the moving the penguins to Ontario.
I'll move
Yes, you'll move me forward. In the banking world, it's really, really simple to do this, because you say, I want to step up authentication. Most of the time, I trust you with your username and password. If you have it, the same device, the same IP, the same browser with the same language settings.
That's fine. It's you.
It's you. And we built something that assumes that only in cases where the user does something specific, we will step them up with SMS or email or additional authentication, like call you and say, is this really you?
Yeah.
And that could be in pre-authentication or post-authentication scenarios, like we let you come in and look at the balance, but the first time you want to transfer money,
We ask you for additional authentication measures.
Exactly. So that's a very well established. In the enterprise world, it's a little bit more complicated, because in the enterprise world, what most people want is a consistent experience. They say, you know what? You have a long session, you come in the morning, you put in your RSA token,
And you forget about it until tomorrow.
and you forget about it until tomorrow, because we don't step you up. We put always the highest level of security we can. Today it's touch IDs and biometrics and whatever phishing resistant factors we can. We start at the top.
But what happens in the meantime?
But exactly.
Shit happens in the meantime.
And that's kind of a little bit of the post-authentication or
Continuous authentication.
It's a continuous authentication. Most cases, what happens is that you authenticate to your IDP to start your SSO sessions, and then you have a lot of mini authentications during the day. And basically, you come into the system, it says, oh, you have your cookie, we're good, continue. Then you turn on RBA, and that's what is called step down. Step down authentication means that if RBA works, we trust you, because you're still coming from the same IP, you're still coming from the same user agent string, you're still coming from the same location. When we see that something in your session has changed, now we will make you authenticate again with the strongest factor that you have.
Yeah, we have similar things happening.
Everybody should have this. This is like basic capabilities. You need to establish how long the session is. And you also need to think of session trust, which is when you log into a specific application, have you done anything to change the trust and basically do something that's suspicious, like changing, like we know that you're doing anomalies, like you're an Okta admin and you usually reset passwords, and suddenly you start clicking on things like downloading information or changing.
That means you're not you're taking admin, but you might be an attacker.
Exactly,
Actually going and doing stuff.
Exactly, because now you're doing stuff that you've never done before. So this is what is called session trust. Looking at your session and understand if you're doing what you used to do, and try to kill the session. There's kill, there's force to re-authenticate. This is why the shared signals framework is there. So for example, sometimes as the session creator, you don't see pieces of information. Like CrowdStrike can see things that you're not seeing and send you indication about a user that says something is fishy. And those things make sense to work I don't want to say in real time, because real time in human space, and this is another thing that's really important to understand. Humans don't interact in real time. Non-human accounts do interact in real time, but humans are slow. Every operation that we do takes multiple seconds, sometimes minutes. And in most cases of a lot of attacks, you see that a session is established, work happens, and sometimes things happen 2-3 days later. Like I create another authenticator and use that secondary authenticator and log in through that session. A lot of times user behavior is really hard to deal with because it's slow. A lot of machines, a lot of the Splunk-based SIMs are meant to see something in a very quick sequence because machines act really, really fast. People are really slow.
Okay.
So this mechanism of additional factors and of additional information of creating session trust. Also, most of our applications, this is something that somebody needs to understand. Most of the applications don't kill the session. You call Microsoft or Salesforce or whatever, and you say, "Hey, kill the session." They'll say, "Yeah, we will," and they don't, because a lot of the old protocols are cookie-based, token-based, something-based. It's HTTP was built as an asynchronous protocol, and we're forcing it to do stuff that it's not built to do.
Okay.
So breaking application being built to be able to kill sessions is a long way out. So now we've established what is RBA, a little bit of where it was born, banking, where it's used now, ease of use for a lot of applications. And it's very common to see this. And sometimes people are trying to paint RBA into something that it's not. Like Microsoft says, "Oh, I have this user trust behavior of the stuff that the Adalom, the Wiz guys created for them a bazillion years ago." But it will basically say somebody's coming in from a new user agent string and did something that they didn't usually do. And that's nice, but it's okay. Okta is trying to build a risk engine, maybe, but it's still primarily geared towards, am I letting you in or am I not letting you in? And that
So the point of access, not the continuous work
Yes.
after you accessed.
Yes. And one of the things that we need to start thinking about is the number of cases where we RBA, risk-based authenticate, or user trust sessions is about 1,000 to 2,000 to 1 in terms of sessions. And that means that about 0.1% of our user population, if I'm Cisco and I have 500,000 people, basically I'm going to bug hundreds of people a day, or if not thousands of people a day, because they have multiple sessions. So we bug a lot of people with the additional work. And that's acceptable because we're not doing something. We can force additional elements like identity verification when we really think that the user trust is really compromised. We can say, you know what? Verify that you're who you say
That
you are.
who you are. Yeah.
That you are who you are. But that's about it. That gives us like another step up of really expensive and very powerful authentication, but it's still not solving the problem of what happens if you're actually compromised.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that most people don't think about, but when a human account is compromised, it's really bad. The reason that it's really bad is, how do you remediate?
We had a full episode
Yes.
recently
Exactly.
discussing it.
Exactly. And this is a very expensive, and I recommend people listen to that episode. Remediation of a human account getting taken over is very expensive because sometimes they have multiple sessions, they have multiple authenticators. You need to reset their machines. What happens with the cookies? The cookies don't, we just said the applications don't actually log you out. And this concept of a higher level of understanding of compromise or risk is important to know. Should you, as the guy sitting at the security desk, understand, do you want to pull the cord? because when you pull the cord, it's something that it's really hard to bring back.
Okay. So bringing you back, what do people need to think about? What is the advancement in technology that you see going on?
So I think the first thing is understand that you need some way to evaluate with concept of user reputation, non-human identities, trust, things like that, of are your policies doing what bless you.
Sorry.
Are your policies doing what you think that they should be doing? And this is an important thing, because a lot of times when we ran the analytics of user trust, we saw that in many cases, it highlighted broken policies of allowing access to sensitive applications from unmanaged devices.
So you are assessing the policy and recommending policy change. You automatically changing the policy?
No automation. The user trust is at the point in time where it's used at the point in time when you need human intervention. Maybe some AI at some point will come in and be smarter than everybody. But at this point in time, because the remediation is so painful and the outcome of a false positive is so big, we recommend that this is one of those things that you need to think, at least at some part, of what is the action that you want to take. So sometimes you'll see that you forgot to put people on VIP lists. You see that sometimes your policy, especially for admin access, is misconfigured. Sometimes you see that your policy says what it think it does, and that's a little bit of Vicini from Princess Bride, that I don't think it means what you think it means. So there's a lot of that going on. In most cases, it highlights the flaws in the system and drives you to change policy and reaction. And you do need to have one lever that basically says, this is like really bad. Please don't let anybody in if they're looking like this. So for example, if somebody is like a CEO of a company, or the CEO of the company is actually less damaging than most people think. In most cases, it's the head of IT. It's people that are over-provisioned on permissions and are not doing their jobs at that level. So it's usually somebody that is like an over-provisioned admin, a super admin. A lot of times you want to be able to say, and usually you want to put it in a different control than the inline control that controls the system, to say, hey, this, you may want to block access for a period of time here until an investigation will happen. When an investigation happens, you can decide if you want to allow traffic. But the state of the user doesn't change, because the user is still risky. They did something really bad. So you need to think of this as like convictions in law enforcement. Conviction happened. Something bad has happened. The fact that something remediation might have happened doesn't reverse the state of the conviction, because you need to think of where do you want to put enforcement. So this is challenging a little bit of the system that would like to run on autopilot, but it's, I think, a mandatory state to think of how do you get to a better situation. Because right now, as we know, identity threats are number one. We need to push for the stronger phishing resistant, the stronger processes, the stronger passwordless, and those will prevent going into those bad states.
Device trust.
Exactly. But
it all comes to the fact that you need a strong policy and you need it to be adaptive, and you need ways to...
And transparent.
And what you're saying, it's kind of like you providing a level of the transparent, of kind of a feedback loop to tell you the policy you built is not necessarily doing what you wanted it to do, or you have gaps, or things are out of order. So you can kind of like go improve, change it.
Yep.
I mean, if it's already an issue, remediate it, but kind of like not having it as a static thing, that you don't have the ability to get a feedback loop if it actually makes sense, if you chose the right policy for you, and get you ideas for other policies you need to put in place. So it's kind of like policy recommendation engine.
Yes, and it's also where to start. One of the biggest things that people ask.
The 80-20.
Exactly. Where do I start?
Yeah.
And this is an important thing.
So where should people start? What is typically the place to start?
Really, the place to start is implementing some service that thinks through the user risk, understanding what their risks are, what their reputation counters are. How would they view the risk and the posture?
Yeah, and I think you said it out loud, start with the most risky community, which is probably the admins, the ones that have more privileges, the ones that...
Unmanaged service accounts, unviewable service accounts. This is the thing the
holy grail of risk.
Yes, which usually the unsupervised service account that somebody created 1 million years ago.
Those are the one that you always see that the first one to have takeover.
Exactly, because it's some admin that left the company 20 years ago. They're sitting there in the background. They were used to replicate one database to another, AD to another.
It's kind of like the first thing that a hacker will search for.
Exactly.
Will find those dormant accounts that they can leverage to, they maybe they'll fish somebody in IT and then through lateral movement or whatever, figure out this kind of account that they can take over and persist.
Yes.
So that's kind of like the way of thinking of it from a hacker standpoint.
Yes. And also assume that your policy can never block everything. You need something that you have a continuous policy of evaluation, assessment, reassessment of where your state of risk is and how your user reputation relates to your overall posture. Because if you have a lot of risky users, your posture might need to be tightened. If you have fewer users that are risky, maybe your posture can be looser.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Things you want to add?
Nope. Anything you want to know?
No, I think this is like to the point. We have, us available. Are you traveling soon to any of those upcoming conferences?
I am going to Gartner. I'll probably have a speaking session at Identiverse and Cisco Live.
Maybe I'll promote. Probably this episode will come just before BeyondCon West Coast, which is happening on the 20th of March. So if you're on the West Coast and you want to have time to meet, we're having an awesome event in Palo Alto, the West in Palo Alto on the 20th. Search for BeyondCon. I can drop a link in the show notes. I hope to see you there. Let's have a drink or come over. I'll be in West Coast.
Awesome.
In March.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, with that, short and sweet. As always, Didi is your expert in identity, and I'm the one to help kind of facilitate ideation around that. If you have thoughts, if you have questions around setting policy, risky behavior, identity, trust, and all this, reach out to us. The Didi and Lital Show is a weekly podcast. We would like to have more listeners, so rate us as 5 if you like the episodes, because that helps with the algorithm that more people will see us. And send it to your friends. We'd like to hear if there are topics you would like us to cover. See you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.